This video is brought to you by Battle Axe. Overlord has been one of the most widely used third-party tools for After Effects ever since it was released in 2017, and I've always recommended it to After Effects users way before I started working for Battle Axe. It's just one of those tools that saves you so much time that it immediately pays for itself, and now, 7 years later, it just got a whole lot better. If you're one of the very few After Effects users who aren't already familiar with Overlord, it's an Adobe extension made by Battle Axe for transferring shapes from Illustrator to After Effects. Getting Illustrator art into After Effects as shape layers has always been an overly complicated process with way too many steps and limitations. Overlord makes transferring shapes as easy as clicking a button. There's a lot more to Overlord, but at its core, it's that simple. Just select what you want to transfer and push it to After Effects. And with version 2, we've got a lot of exciting new things to share. Now, I'm sure some of you are ready to upgrade right now, and that's great. For a limited time, Overlord 2 is available at a discounted price. Check the link in the description to head to the Battle Axe website now. But there's just so much that I need to get through in this video, and you really need to make sure you stay until the very end for a very exciting Overlord announcement. Let's get right into it. First, I want to just talk about a few of the updates and changes to Overlord. Probably the most obvious is that it's now a desktop app. It runs in the background, it lives in your system tray. This is where you can install the extensions for After Effects and Illustrator and keep everything up to date. You can check out your license and see all of that good stuff, as well as know when updates are available and easily update them right here without having to do any kind of ZXP installation. It's all managed right in the app, super convenient, and it even tells you which apps are open so that you know that it's talking to those apps and everything's working fine. But here's the extension inside of After Effects. You can see it looks very similar to V1, the same thing over here in Illustrator. So the core of the extension is really the same. Now, if you're a V1 user of Overlord, then you already know just how fast it is at rebuilding layers in After Effects, but Adam has completely rewritten how Overlord works from the ground up, and it's even faster, so you can appreciate that. And there's also now basically an unlimited layer count. You can transfer as much as you want. We've tested it up to 1,200 layers, and it had no issue. And if you're working with more than 1,200 layers in an After Effects comp, then I need to know what your computer specs are, because that's insane. Now, if you've ever worked with really, really large artboards in Illustrator, I'm talking like 8K, and you have 5 or more in a single document, you might have noticed that transferring artwork to After Effects gets scaled down really, really far, and that just doesn't happen anymore. Adam has eliminated that problem, so you can work as large as you want, essentially, and have no issues transferring that over to After Effects. Support for clipping masks has been improved even further and takes advantage of the new track matte system in After Effects. So if I just make a shape here, and let's do another one, and actually let's do a third one. I'm gonna select all 3 of these and press Control or Command 7, and that's gonna use one of those objects as the clipping mask. So this one here, you can see that now I have 2 shapes, and I'll make this one a different color just so we can differentiate, but they're both using the same clipping mask. Now, if I grab that and I make a new comp by clicking the New Comp from Artboard button, we now have a matching comp over here in After Effects, and I'm going to just transfer this over with the push button, and you'll notice that we have more than one layer, and this is intentional because it's taking advantage of that new track matte system. So these are the 2 rectangles that I had inside of Illustrator, the 2 different colors. This is the one being used as a matte, and they're all parented to this group layer that has the guide switch enabled so it won't render, but it's the size of all 3 of those rectangles together. So it's essentially the bounding box for that group. That's a massive improvement to how we can handle clipping masks in After Effects. Transferring text was already supported in V1, but now we can do text on a path. So if I make a path here real quick, just like an arc, and then I type out some text on top of it, we'll just say Overlord 2 is here. Center it up and push it over to After Effects. It's gonna come in exactly as it was in Illustrator, using the mask as the path for that text. So it's now aligned exactly like we had in Illustrator. Gradients have also been extremely improved. You can pretty much throw any linear or radial gradient at Overlord and it's gonna have no problem transferring it over. So let's just change these colors and add in multiple color knots. Let's grab that pink, purple, and why not green? So we've got this gradient. I can modify this however I want. Maybe I want to make it bigger or smaller or draw it from a different point. I like that. I'll just push this over. It's gonna come in exactly the way that it was in Illustrator if I double click, and let's change these colors so we can see this a little bit more clearly. You can see those endpoints are exactly where I had them in Illustrator. I can just as easily modify them, and the color knots are exactly where they were when I set it up in Illustrator. So extremely rock solid endpoint placement. It's gonna come in exactly how you want, either linear or radial. Freeform gradients and gradient meshes are not supported by After Effects. There's no way to recreate that, so that's not gonna transfer, but linear and radial gradients are rock solid now. Now, a lot of things in Illustrator are live or non-destructive. They allow you to repeat objects or add transformations like distortions that we have inside of Illustrator without actually affecting the vector paths. The problem is those features don't exist in After Effects, at least not in the same way, so we're not able to transfer them one-to-one from Illustrator to After Effects, except now we kind of can, because Overlord is going to detect those live shapes and expand them before transferring, and then revert it back to the live state in Illustrator. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm gonna grab this star here, and I'm just gonna make a copy of it, and I'll scale it down. Let's just repeat this radially. So I'm gonna go up to Object, Repeat, and I'll say radial. That's gonna give me this live shape where I can control how many repetitions there are, how far away it is from the center, and even kind of wipe it on and off if I don't want it to be the whole thing. Whatever state I leave this in before transferring it over will be expanded. So I can just click the button, it's expanded and shot over, and we have it here in After Effects now. There's the same exact shape, just as expanded paths. And in Illustrator, we still have access to those live controls. This is gonna be true for essentially anything that needs to be expanded before being sent over to After Effects. Parametric shape detection has also been improved. So if I just draw another square here and I rotate it a little bit, this could sometimes throw off the V1 parametric shape detection. Now, even though it's rotated, if I just double tap the U, you'll see this actually is a parametric square rectangle inside of After Effects. That's gonna be much more accurate for both rectangles and ellipses. And Overlord version 2 is going to respect whatever your AE preferences are for separate dimensions. So I don't have that preference checked on in After Effects right now, so my position dimensions are together, but if you went up to Edit, Preferences, General, and you prefer to have that default position properties to separate dimensions, click OK, and we transfer that over again. Let's just move it, bring up the position. Those are now separated. Now let's talk about the new workflow that Overlord 2 brings. First of all, the panel itself has a simplified button layout, hopefully to make everything a little bit more clear so you know exactly what is happening. Some of the buttons are actually hidden by default, and you can get to them just by right-clicking in the panel. So there's a swatches and a guides button we're gonna talk about in a little bit, but let's start with just the first button. You'll notice this little arrow in the bottom right corner. This actually has multiple actions within it. If you click and hold, it's going to show all three options. So the first option, pull selection, is very similar to version 1's pull or push button. Then we have split selection and update properties. So let's go through them one at a time. First of all, pull selection. We've already kind of seen this, but I can now just select any of my Illustrator layers. I'm gonna select everything in this document and push that to After Effects. You'll notice that in Illustrator, it says push selection to After Effects, and in After Effects, it says pull selection from Illustrator. So it's the same action, it's just going to have a different icon and a different description. They live in the same place though, so that helps with just a little more consistency. So let's push that over to After Effects. It's going to rebuild all of my layers, and here it is exactly as it was in Illustrator. Now this first button option, pull selection or push selection from Illustrator, is going to treat Illustrator groups as their own individual After Effects shape layers. So if we take a look in my layer stack down here, you'll see that there's a computer, and that contains a lot more than just one shape. That's everything that's in my computer group over here in Illustrator. So all of these groups that you see here, those are transferred over as shape layers, and any subgroups that live within those groups are going to show up in the shape layer content. So if I go into that computer layer, we see 1, 2, 3, 4 more groups with the same label names that we had in Illustrator. So those subgroups here in Illustrator, they are reflected in the shape groups inside of After Effects. That's how the first button's going to work. Illustrator groups equals After Effects shape layers. Illustrator subgroups equal groups inside of those shape layers in After Effects. This is a great option for when you don't need access to all of those individual shapes in a single element, or if you're comfortable animating inside a single shape layer. And if you do want to contain more objects in a single shape layer, just group them. So I'm going to grab everything except the background here and the floor, group that together. I'll call this computer, grab everything and push it over to After Effects, and I should have much fewer layers. There's the computer layer that contains all of the artwork there. So that's how you can control what gets contained within a single shape layer. Now the second option over here is split selection. And this is really powerful if you need access to absolutely everything. So let's just clear all this out. I'll delete it and I'll undo back here in Illustrator where we were. We still have all of the same groups, but if I select it all and I split the layers, pushing that over to After Effects, it's going to bring each individual element of every single one of those shapes as its own shape layer. So now we have many, many more layers in our comp, but we have the ability to animate every single one of them individually. But to help you with the organization of all of this, Overlord has also generated a bunch of guide layers. These are group layers that correspond to the groups that we had in Illustrator. So if I zoom in here, I have a cursor group that is the parent of the two layers that make up that group. And it's automatically sized that group container to the shape, again, acting like a bounding box. And this is true for all of the groups. So I can grab the window there, my app drawer down here, the mouse, the computer. There's going to be a group for every one of those, but the subgroups come with it. So I've got my taskbar subgroup right here. I've got the system icons over here, and there's a group layer for each and every one of those. And that on its own is great for organization of all of these split up elements and not having to do any extra work to move them around as groups. But on top of that, we have a groups section of Overlord that works really well with these group guide layers. So let me show you how it works. I can grab any one of these elements. Let's say the window here, this window group that has a bunch of subgroups under it for all the individual elements that live within that window. But I'm just gonna grab the top group and I'm gonna click on the first button in the group section, pre-comp. As soon as I do that, it's going to pre-compose everything that was underneath that group layer in the parent hierarchy, sized exactly to that group guide layer's bounds, and leave it in the exact same place that it was. So now I have a single layer for all of those layers. And if I double click to go inside, there are all of the layers that make up that window. So I can animate specifically in this pre-comp now, and it will be reflected in my main comp. And I can just as easily bring all of those layers back with the decomp button. This will decompose the layers and rebuild everything exactly as it was, even if you've changed things about it. So if I pre-comp that one more time and I move it over here and I decide I want to rotate it and scale it down, and then I decompose it, all of those layers are going to come in with the exact same transformations, but it gets even better. Let's say I animated it to that position. Let's undo and I add a position keyframe and a scale keyframe and a rotation. And then I go forward a little bit and I rotate this, scale it down and move it over. And I add some easing to all these keyframes, and then I decompose it. Well, all of those keyframes are going to be transferred over to that group guide layer. Animation is preserved, layers are brought back. This is just an incredible workflow that I have loved getting to test out and get to this point. I think you're gonna find a lot of use for it. And what's really great is that it works with more than just Overlord guide layers. It works with any layers inside of After Effects. So if I made some custom layers here, let me just clear out my comp, and I just made, a rectangle, and why not a circle as well? I could grab both of those and I can pre-comp them, I can decompose them. The whole system still works even if they're not guide layers. The only difference is that the pre-comps will be sized to the comp that they came from. But this also works really well with Void, which is a free tool from Battle Axe that essentially generates null objects and any other type of solid layer using shape layers. So if I were to select these two shapes and click the Void button, it's gonna give me a parent Void layer for those two objects. And if I have that selected, since it's the parent, and pre-compose it, it's gonna bring all of the children with it. So if you're already a Void user, this is gonna go along with your workflow really, really well. All right, let's bring those shapes back in. I should still have my selection here in Illustrator, I do, and let's just test it out from After Effects. You see that we have pull selection from Illustrator with split layers. I'm just gonna do that from here. Again, it does the same action for all three of the buttons here. Now I've got all of my layers back. Sometimes those group layers can get in the way. Like if I want to grab that window, I'm probably going to accidentally click on that computer's guide layer. So to toggle the visibility of all of them off, we have a toggle button here. Just click that and then you can grab any elements that you need to and just as easily toggle them all back on. Or if you don't need the guide layers, which might be the case sometimes, you can just press the delete button and that'll delete all of the Overlord guides out of your comp. And one more quick tip there, if you don't want to disable the visibility of everything, you just need to get underneath a certain group, but you can't see it, just press the X key and that will bring that layer to the top of the list. And then you can just disable the visibility right there. Or you could even use the keyboard shortcut, which I believe on a PC is Control-Alt-Shift-V. Yep, that disables the visibility of the selected layers. So probably Command-Option-Shift-V on a Mac. So just another option for a way to quickly hide or show layers in After Effects. All right, let's take a look at the third button here, Update Properties. Again, I'm gonna just delete everything out of my comp. And we're gonna take a look at a much simpler document over here, just a few shapes, and I wanna push this over to After Effects using the standard push. So we just have a few different layers here. And what this Update Properties button is for is when you wanna make changes to things that you've already transferred to After Effects. So maybe there's something in Illustrator that you decide, oh, I wanna make some changes here and just push them back over without actually transferring the artwork. Or maybe there's just something that's easier to modify inside of Illustrator with its better vector editing tools than After Effects, and you wanna just do the work there and bring it back. That's exactly what this button is for. So let's say in Illustrator, I decide I don't want this to be pink, I want it to be yellow. So I'm gonna change its color to yellow, and I also want it to be a circle instead of a square. So I'm gonna do that, and I want it to be in the middle here. Well, all I need to do is go back to After Effects now and select that rectangle, and then select those properties that I modified. So if I double tap the U key, that'll bring up all of my modified properties. So fill color, that's something I updated, and then the position, I changed that as well, but because this is a custom path, it's not a parametric shape like a rectangle or an ellipse, I can just select the path property. So I'll Control or Command click on that, and then click on the Update Properties button. All of those transformations now are going to be reflected here in After Effects. The shape of the path, the location of that path, and the color that's been applied to it. And it doesn't even have to be this shape. I could grab this rectangle over here and double tap the U key, and I could grab the color and just change that. Or I could grab the path property as well and update that, and now they're both in the same place. But let's say we were working with a parametric shape. I'm just gonna make a rectangle up here and we'll change it to be that pinkish color. As long as I don't round those corners, Overlord will detect that is a rectangle and make it a parametric shape in After Effects. You could rotate it, you can change the shape to be non-square, doesn't matter, but I'm just gonna push that over and now we have that parametric shape with the size property as well as the position and the roundness. Now let's make some changes to that here in After Effects. We'll pull it down, we'll change its color, rotate it, maybe scale it down a little bit. So I've modified quite a bit about that rectangle. We'll go back to After Effects, and really I just wanna update everything about this rectangle. So since there isn't a path property, I'm going to just select the contents as well as the transform. So all of the properties that make up this layer essentially, and then I'll click on the Update Properties button and everything will be applied to it. So just keep that in mind when you're working with custom paths, you don't need to grab the transform properties, but if it's a parametric shape, you will need to make that selection, and it's really easy to just select everything about the layer and then click that button. Now what's really cool about this is that it respects keyframes. So if I once again press the U key twice to bring up all of the properties I've modified, and I set a keyframe on the color, and why not the size, and let's say the rotation and position as well, then I back this up a little bit so it's not overlapping those keyframes. I can change anything I want about this rectangle. Let's make it that red color again. Click OK, and then as long as I have all of those properties selected and update, it's gonna generate new keyframes for all of them, and if I'm over top of the keyframes, it's going to overwrite them. So if you wanna jump back and forth between Illustrator and take advantage of the tools that you have to edit vectors over there and just shoot back keyframes to After Effects, you absolutely can do that. So that's the Update Properties button. Let's get rid of this and bring back our computer. I'll just use the regular push button for this one and let that rebuild in After Effects. And let's take a look at the bonus actions of Overlord. So again, if we right click in the panel, we can enable other buttons. So we have show swatches. If I turn that on, it'll bring it up in the panel, and we have show guides. We made these buttons optional because not everybody needs to see them all the time, and it just saves on the real estate of the panel. But let's start with the swatches button. So over here in Illustrator, I'm gonna bring up my swatches panel, and I don't actually need any of these swatches. So I'm just gonna select them all and delete, clear them all out, and make my own palette really quickly. Now to do that really quickly in Illustrator, just make a selection of your layers and then come over and click on this folder icon, the new color group button. Make sure selected artwork is checked, and then click OK, and a swatches panel from all of the colors you have selected is generated for you. With that done, I can click the swatches button, and it's going to bring it over in After Effects as this handy little guide layer, so it won't render, but you can easily reference it for anything else that you need in your comp. Really, really handy to have. Now, if you're a Ray Dynamic Color user from Sonder Van Dyke, you can also make this compatible with it. So just check on Use Ray Dynamic Color, and instead of building your swatches as a guide layer, it will just add it to the active palette or make a new palette in Ray Dynamic Color. Unfortunately, it is currently not working with the latest version of After Effects. It only works with 24.3 and older. I know that they're working on getting that compatible, but as of right now, you gotta be using an older version of After Effects if you use Ray Dynamic Color. All right, let's take a look at the guides button. In Illustrator, we'll pull out some guides from our rulers, line this up somewhere in the middle, and just click on the guides button, and that's gonna rebuild the guides here in After Effects as native After Effects guides. So I can click and drag those around just like normal. But in Illustrator, we have the ability to have custom guides. So if I wanted to have, I don't know, a star-shaped guide, I can draw a star out here and just press Control-5, and now that's a custom guide layer. It's kind of hard to see on that gray background, but there it is. And what Illustrator's gonna do with that is make a shape layer set to a guide styled in a very similar way to what we had inside of Illustrator. So both Illustrator guide types are supported, and that's how Overlord's gonna bring them through. All right, we've got a few more buttons to go over here. I'm just gonna turn off my swatches and my guides. We've already looked at this button, but I'm just gonna bring attention to it. It's the new comp from artboard button. So if I were to make another artboard, any size here, and it's active here in Illustrator, and I say new comp from Illustrator artboard, it's just gonna do exactly that. Make a new comp the same size as what your artboard was in Illustrator, and it's gonna give it the same name as the artboard. In the same way, I could click on this button right here, New Illustrator Artboard from After Effects Comp, and whichever comp is active, that's going to make a new artboard in the active open document over in Illustrator. So those are two really quick ways of being able to match whatever document you're working from in the other app. And finally, we have this push selected layers to Illustrator. This is gonna allow us to move shapes from After Effects back to Illustrator. It's a little bit more limited than pulling things from Illustrator, but it's still really useful. So let's say that for whatever reason, I was drawing a path here in After Effects and I just wasn't able to make the shape that I want. I'm not happy with the pen tool here in After Effects. Well, that's exactly what this button will let me do. I can grab the layer, push it back to Illustrator, and it's gonna show up in the exact same spot since my artboard matches my comp. I can now use whatever tools I'm most comfortable using to modify this path, change it however I want, and when I'm happy with it, I just need to make sure that the path is selected here in After Effects, and I can use the Update Properties button to bring those changes back to After Effects. And that's really all there is to it. There are a lot of things that aren't supported with this button. We can't send effects or parenting or anything like that that's After Effects only to Illustrator, but when you need to make adjustments to paths, that's where this button really comes in handy. That's it for all of the new features, improvements, and workflows for Overlord 2, but there's still one more huge announcement. With the new Overlord app, we have a lot of new possibilities for what Overlord can do and which apps it's able to talk to. In addition to all of the new features, Adam is currently building support for Figma, meaning you'll be able to transfer shapes from a web-based app to After Effects just as easily as you can with Illustrator right now, and support for Photoshop is also on the way. I hope this news is just as exciting to you as it is to us. There are just so many more possibilities for Overlord now. We would really love to add Affinity Designer to this list, but as of right now, there's no API available, so it's just not possible yet. But that hasn't stopped us from dreaming big when it comes to apps that work with Overlord. We've built a roadmap for features in development right now, as well as our future plans for Overlord, and you can check that out. There's a link in the description to stay on top of all of that. Now, Adam is currently working on importing Illustrator artwork as layers, support for per character text styling, K-bar compatibility, image transfers from Illustrator, and rasterizing and importing shapes or groups as PNGs in After Effects. So there are a lot of new features and improvements coming soon that you'll have access to as soon as they're ready. Now, when you purchase a license for Overlord, you own it forever. It'll keep working as long as it's supported by the apps it's used with. Adam is constantly working on those new features and improvements, and you'll gain access to all of the updates for 1 year after purchasing your license. After that time, you'll keep full access to everything you already have, but you will need to renew your license to gain access to anything new beyond that point. And that's just about it. Thank you so much for your support of Battle Axe over the years, and we can't wait to hear how you like the new Overlord. If you have any questions or need any support, be sure to join the Battle Axe Discord server. Adam is in there all the time, and he's very responsive and wants to hear what you want to see Overlord do in the future. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope this news is exciting to you. I hope this news is I hope this news is I can't say that. I really hope this news is why can't I say it? I hope this news is as exciting to you. I hope this news is as exciting to you as it is to us. I hope this news is just as exciting to you as it is. I hope this news is just as exciting to you. I hope this news is just as exciting to you. I hope this news is I hope this news is just as I hope this news is just as exciting to you as it is to us. There are just so many more possibilities for Overlord now.